She thought it was the worst moment of her life, spilling coffee on a stranger in a crowded diner. But that single accident set off a chain of events that would change her daughter's fate, her future, and her very identity. What was inside the mysterious envelope left behind would shock her forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, the kind of smell that clung to clothes long after the shift ended. It was 6 in the morning in Austin, Texas, and Lena Morales had been awake since 4. Her eyes felt heavy, her body heavier. She had closed at a grocery store the night before, then cleaned offices until nearly midnight. By the time she crawled into bed, her alarm had already been set for just 3 hours later. At 32, Lena looked older than she should have. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Strands of hair kept falling loose from the messy bun she had thrown together in the bathroom mirror. Her black sneakers were worn thin, and the pale blue uniform clung to her with the faint smell of dish soap and old sweat. She didn't care anymore. What mattered was making it through another shift, another paycheck, another week of keeping her daughter's medicine cabinet stocked and the rent paid. The diner was packed that morning. Truck drivers filled one side of the counter, their loud voices competing with the hiss of the griddle. A group of construction workers sat by the window, still in their dusty boots, ready for another long day. The regulars occupied their booths, men and women who Lena knew by face, if not by name, who ordered the same thing every morning. She balanced 2 plates in one hand, a pot of coffee in the other. Her chest ached with the familiar tightness that came when exhaustion blurred her focus. She forced herself to keep smiling as she slid plates across the table, topped off mugs, and scribbled new orders on her pad. In her mind, she repeated the same promise over and over. Just get through today. Just keep going. She had just finished refilling sugar jars when a new customer walked in. He slipped quietly into a corner booth near the back, away from the crowds. She noticed him because he seemed different, not like the tired workers or chatty regulars. He wore a plain black jacket, jeans, and a ball cap pulled low. Something about his presence was calm, almost too calm compared to the chaos around him. Lena grabbed a menu and hurried over. Her sneakers squeaked against the tiled floor as she stopped at his table. "Morning," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. "Coffee?" The man looked up, and for a brief moment, Lena's breath caught. His eyes were kind but steady, the kind of eyes that noticed everything without trying. He gave a small nod. "Yes, please." She poured coffee into his mug, her hand trembling slightly from too many hours without rest. He thanked her softly, his voice low and even, then opened the menu. She moved on, scribbling more orders, running back and forth between the tables and the kitchen window, where orders stacked faster than they could be filled. Minutes later, she returned with her pot of coffee, balancing 2 plates of scrambled eggs on her arm. Her sneakers slipped on a patch of spilled syrup near the counter, and in that instant, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The pot tipped forward. Dark coffee spilled across the table, dripping over the edge, splashing onto the customer's jacket and jeans. Lena gasped, nearly dropping the plates. She set them down with a clatter, heart pounding in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, fumbling for the rag in her apron. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold it. "I didn't mean, oh my God. I'm so sorry." She dabbed frantically at the coffee spreading. Across the table, her cheeks burning. Her manager's voice echoed in her head, warnings about clumsy mistakes, threats of cutting shifts if she messed up again. She braced herself for the customer's anger, for yelling, for the humiliation she knew too well. But it didn't come. Instead, the man stood slowly, brushing at his jeans with a calmness that disarmed her completely. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Really. Don't worry." Lena froze, rag still in her hand. You're not burned?" He shook his head. "It's just coffee. I've been through worse." A faint smile touched his face, almost amused at her panic. She blinked, finally taking in his features now that his cap had shifted back. Recognition dawned slowly, like a light breaking through fog. She knew that face, though not from the diner or anywhere in Austin. Her stomach dropped. It was Keanu Reeves. The realization made her knees weak. She stared, words caught in her throat, certain that she had just ruined not only her shift, but possibly her life. Lena's heart raced so hard she thought everyone in the diner could hear it. She had seen Keanu Reeves in movies for years, but never expected him to be sitting in her section, never expected to spill coffee on him of all people. I can get the manager," she stammered. "We'll cover your clothes, the meal, whatever you want. Please, don't." Keanu raised his hand gently, stopping her apology mid-sentence. His eyes were steady, calm, and without even a trace of frustration. "It's fine," he said again, voice soft but certain. "Accidents happen. You've got enough to carry without worrying about this." The words disarmed her. Enough to carry. How could he possibly see through her so quickly? She blinked hard, trying to hide the sting of tears. No one ever told her it was okay. Not her manager, not the customers who barked at her when the orders were late, not the landlord who slipped notes under her door, reminding her about the rent. She whispered, "Thank you," and tried to steady her breathing as she wiped the table. Keanu helped, grabbing a stack of napkins and blotting the spill like it was his mess instead of hers. When the damage was cleaned, he sat back down and finished his coffee as if nothing had happened. No anger, no complaints, just quiet presence. He ate his eggs and toast slowly, tipped generously, and slipped out with little more than a nod. It wasn't until Lena returned to clear the table that she saw it. A white envelope sat beneath the coffee mug, sealed, her name written across the front in neat handwriting. Her stomach twisted. How did he know her name? Lena froze, the envelope trembling in her hand. For a moment, she wondered if this was a mistake, if maybe another table had left it behind. But no, her name was written in bold black ink, perfectly spelled. Someone had left it for her, and she already knew who. She glanced around the diner, half hoping he was still there. But Keanu was gone. Just the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversations remained. A coworker brushed past her with a tray of plates, muttering about table 9 needing refills. Life in the diner moved on, but Lena stood rooted to the spot. Her world suddenly tilted. Her hands itched to tear the envelope open, right then and there. Maybe it was just a thank you note, maybe something kind to soften her humiliation, but a flicker of fear kept her from opening it. Why would a man like him, someone larger than life, bother with her? She slid the envelope into her apron pocket, pressing it flat against her side as if hiding a treasure. All through the rest of her shift, she carried it like a secret. When customers shouted for more coffee, when the manager scolded her for being slow, when her legs burned from running table to table, her hand brushed the envelope, and it reminded her that something strange and impossible had happened. By the time the lunch crowd thinned, Lena was exhausted but restless. Every thought circled back to the envelope. What was inside? Money? A message? An opportunity? She didn't know, and the not knowing gnawed at her. As she clocked out, she pressed a hand over her pocket. One thing was certain. That envelope was going to change everything. The apartment was dark when Lena unlocked the door, the only light spilling in from a crooked street lamp outside. She pushed it open quietly, her body aching from 14 straight hours at the diner. The smell of reheated rice and soy sauce lingered from the dinner her neighbor had dropped off earlier for Maya. "Mom?" A small voice called from the bedroom. Lena dropped her purse on the counter and hurried down the short hallway. Maya was propped up in bed with her stuffed rabbit under one arm, her face pale but smiling. Her dark hair framed her cheeks, damp from the sponge bath the neighbor had helped her with. "You're awake," Lena whispered, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "I thought you'd be asleep by now. I wanted to wait for you. Did you work late again?" Lena nodded and brushed the hair back from Maya's face. "The diner was busy, but I'm home now." She tucked the blankets tighter around her daughter's thin frame. The sight of Maya's chest rising and falling unevenly made Lena's own breath hitch. Every shallow inhale reminded her of the diagnosis, of the surgery they couldn't afford, of the countdown she tried not to think about. Maya reached for her hand. Did anything good happen today? Lena hesitated. The envelope in her apron pocket seemed to burn against her skin. She had carried it all the way home without opening it, too scared of what she might find. Slowly, she pulled it out and held it up. "This was left for me at the diner," she said softly. Maya's eyes widened. "What is it?" "I don't know yet." Lena sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she slid a finger under the flap. She tore it open carefully, as if the paper itself might explode. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a stack of crisp $100 bills. Her breath caught. There wasn't just a few bills, there were stacks, neatly bound. She pulled them out and placed them on her lap. Her fingers shook as she counted quickly. 1,000, 2, 3. It didn't stop until she reached 10. $10,000. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard and unfolded the note that had been tucked alongside the cash. In tidy handwriting, it read, "You work harder than anyone should. Don't give up. There's more if you call this number." Beneath the words was a local phone number, written in ink that looked deliberate, not rushed. Lena's heart slammed in her chest. $10,000. Enough to pay 2 months of rent. Enough to cover the medical bills piling on her table. Enough to keep Maya stable for a while longer. But it was also terrifying. Who leaves money like this? What did they mean by more? She looked at Maya, who was staring wide-eyed at the stacks of cash. "Is it real?" the girl asked. Lena swallowed hard. "Yes, baby, it's real." But in her heart, doubt gnawed. Nothing this good came without a catch. Lena gathered the money into a neat pile on the blanket, afraid even to breathe on it too hard. The bills looked impossibly clean, newer than anything she had ever held in her life. She rubbed one between her fingers, half expecting it to dissolve into dust. Maya leaned forward, her thin shoulders trembling with excitement. "Mom, we can pay for the hospital now, can't we? We can fix my heart." The words pierced Lena like a knife. She wanted to say yes, wanted to let her daughter believe the nightmare was over, but she couldn't. Not yet. 10,000 was a miracle, but it wasn't enough for the surgery. That cost 10 times more. Still, it was hope. Hope she hadn't dared to hold on to in so long. Lena forced a smile. "This will help a lot," she said carefully. "It means we can pay some bills and keep you safe until the doctors say it's time for surgery." Maya's eyes lit up with a sparkle that Lena hadn't seen in months. "So, it's like a superhero gift," she whispered. "Like someone is looking out for us." Lena brushed away a tear. Maybe it is, but inside, suspicion coiled like a snake. Who would give them this? Why her? She replayed the morning at the diner in her mind. The moment the coffee spilled, the kindness in Keanu's voice, the way he hadn't gotten angry. Could it really have been him? A movie star leaving behind a small fortune? Her hands tightened around the note. "Don't give up. There's more if you call this number." The words echoed in her mind. She wanted to believe they were genuine, but another part of her screamed danger. What if it was some kind of trap? What if calling that number meant owing someone more than she could ever repay? She shoved the envelope back into her purse and tucked the money into a shoebox beneath the bed. "We'll figure this out tomorrow," she told Maya softly. "For now, you need to rest." Her daughter lay back, clutching her stuffed rabbit close. "Do you think Daddy sent it?" Maya asked suddenly, her voice quiet. Lena's throat tightened. She hadn't spoken of Daniel in months, not since the accident. He would have done anything to save his little girl. But he was gone, leaving Lena to fight alone. She bent down and kissed Maya's forehead. "Maybe he had a hand in it," she whispered. "Maybe he's still watching over us." Maya smiled faintly and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, and she drifted to sleep. Lena sat beside her, staring at the purse where the envelope lay hidden. Gratitude swelled inside her, tangled with suspicion and fear. She could almost hear the ticking of a clock, reminding her that every day mattered, that Maya's heart didn't have unlimited time. She glanced at the note again. The number seemed to glow in her memory, like a lifeline and a warning all at once. Should she call it? Lena couldn't sleep. She lay awake long after Maya's soft breaths filled the small apartment. staring at the ceiling as the weight of the envelope pressed on her chest. The city outside was restless sirens in the distance, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the faint hum of traffic. But it was the silence inside her that terrified her most. She rose quietly, padded to the kitchen, and set the note on the table. The phone number stared back at her like a challenge. She traced it with her finger, over and over, until her hand trembled. $10,000 in cash. No strings written, no conditions listed. But was anything in life truly free? She thought about the bills stacked in a drawer, rent overdue, hospital invoices stamped final notice, the pediatric cardiologist who had looked at her with pity but no solutions. And most of all, she thought of Maya, her daughter's chest rising unevenly, her laughter growing rarer, her strength slipping away piece by piece. Lena pressed her face into her hands. Gratitude tangled with fear. Was this gift a miracle or a snare? Her mind returned to that moment in the diner. Keanu Reeves, sitting quietly at her table, not flinching when the hot coffee splashed his sleeve, not scolding her when she expected anger. Instead, he had seen her, really seen her. Could it have been him? Could the envelope be his way of helping without humiliating her? She gripped the note tighter. If it was truly from him, then maybe it was safe. But what if she was wrong? What if dialing the number meant exposing herself and Maya to danger she couldn't undo? Her eyes filled with tears. She thought of Maya asking if Daddy had sent it, clinging to hope like it was air. Lena wanted to give her daughter a future, wanted to give her the surgery that could save her life. Without help, that future was slipping away too fast. She whispered into the quiet kitchen. What do I do? Her phone sat on the counter, screen dark, waiting. She picked it up, thumb hovering over the keypad. She could call now, hear a voice on the other end, learn the truth, or she could tuck the note away and pretend none of this had ever happened. She closed her eyes and drew a shaky breath. Not tonight. She wasn't ready. The weight of responsibility was too heavy, the unknown too sharp. She slid the note back into the envelope and locked it in the top drawer of the kitchen cabinet. As she returned to bed, she glanced once more at Maya's peaceful face. Her daughter's tiny body curled beneath the blanket, her lips parted in sleep, her hands still resting on the stuffed rabbit. Lena knew one thing for certain. This envelope, this gift, this mystery was no accident. It had come to her for a reason. And whether she was ready or not, it was going to change everything. Lena didn't sleep for 2 nights. She worked her shifts at the diner in a fog, replaying the same question over and over in her head. Should she call the number? Each time she thought about it, her chest tightened. She would picture Maya's face, thin and pale against her pillow, and the fear that time was running out pressed harder. On the 3rd night, she couldn't take it anymore. The apartment was quiet. Maya had finally fallen asleep after another long evening of coughing fits, her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly to her chest. Lena stood in the kitchen, staring at the folded note on the table. The number glared at her, as if daring her to dial. Her hand shook as she picked up the phone. She whispered a prayer under her breath and pressed the digits. Each beep of the keypad echoed in her ears. She lifted the phone to her ear. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a gentle voice answered. Hello, is this Lena Morales? The question made her freeze. Whoever was on the other end already knew her name. Her throat went dry. Yes, this is Lena. The voice was calm, professional, almost soothing. Thank you for calling. My name is Daniel. I work with Mr. Reeves. He asked me to be available if you reached out. Her knees almost gave out. She gripped the counter for balance. Mr. Reeves? As in Keanu Reeves? Yes, Daniel said simply. He wanted me to let you know that your call was expected and that he's glad you reached out. Lena pressed her forehead to the cool surface of the counter, her heart hammering. This couldn't be real, but the man's voice carried no malice, no trace of a scammer's edge. He sounded sincere. What does he want from me? She whispered. He doesn't want anything, Daniel replied gently. He just wants to speak with you, privately. If you're comfortable, we'd like to arrange a meeting tomorrow evening. A quiet place. Nothing formal. Lena's stomach twisted. A meeting? With Keanu Reeves? Her voice cracked. Where? There's a small hotel on the edge of town, Daniel explained. The Willow Inn. It has a lounge that's usually empty on weekdays. Mr. Reeves can meet you there at 7 o'clock. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to come. The choice is yours. The choice. It sounded so simple, but it was anything but. Her instincts screamed caution. She barely knew these people. What if it wasn't really Keanu Reeves? What if this was a trap? But the image of the envelope filled her mind again, the money, the words, the lifeline. Her voice trembled as she said, I'll be there. Thank you, Daniel said, his tone warm. I'll send you the details by text. No pressure, Lena. If you change your mind, you don't owe anyone anything. When the call ended, Lena dropped the phone onto the table and stared at the note again. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. The unknown loomed ahead, equal parts terrifying and filled with impossible hope. The next day stretched longer than any Lena could remember. At the diner, the clatter of dishes and the endless shuffle of orders blurred into noise. She moved on instinct, refilling mugs, scribbling tickets, smiling when her manager barked at her to hurry up. All the while, her mind was trapped on the clock. Every tick brought her closer to 7 o'clock. By late afternoon, her hands ached and her uniform was stained with grease and coffee, but she barely noticed. She clocked out and hurried home, her heart thudding against her ribs. Maya was curled on the couch watching cartoons, her face brightening when Lena walked in. You're home early, she said, surprised. Just for tonight, Lena answered, brushing a kiss across her daughter's forehead. She didn't want to explain where she was going. How could she? How could she tell an 8-year-old she was meeting a movie star in a hotel lounge because of an envelope of money left behind like some strange miracle? I need Mrs. Ramirez to watch you for a little while, Lena said gently. I won't be gone long. Maya's smile faltered. Where are you going? Lena hesitated, then smoothed her daughter's hair. I just have a meeting. Something important. I'll explain when I can. Maya nodded, reluctantly. She trusted her mother, even when she didn't understand. At 6:30, Lena stood in front of the small bathroom mirror, smoothing her thrift store blouse, wishing she had something nicer. The reflection staring back at her looked tired, worn, but she tried to straighten her shoulders. Tonight, she couldn't afford to look broken. The Willow Inn sat on the edge of town, a modest place with ivy climbing the stone walls. The parking lot was nearly empty when Lena pulled in with her aging Honda. Her palms were slick on the steering wheel, her stomach twisted in knots. She stepped inside the lounge, where warm lamps lit the small space. Only 2 other people sat at the bar, speaking quietly. Soft jazz drifted through the air. A man in a dark suit stood near the entrance. He had the calm, steady presence of someone who belonged there. When Lena entered, he gave her a reassuring nod. Miss Morales? I'm Daniel. We spoke on the phone. Relief and dread mingled in her chest. Yes, hello. He gestured toward a quiet corner with 2 chairs and a small table. Please, wait here. He'll be with you in a moment. Lena sat, her knees bouncing under the table. She tried to steady her breathing. Every second felt stretched, pulled taut with uncertainty. Was this real? Was she about to look foolish for believing in an impossible kindness? Then, she sensed a shift in the room, like a quiet ripple. She turned toward the entrance. Keanu Reeves walked in. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. No cameras followed him. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, his hair slightly tousled, his presence unassuming but undeniable. And in that moment, Lena knew this was no trick. Keanu walked slowly toward the corner where Lena sat, his steps unhurried, his presence calm yet steady. He looked nothing like the untouchable celebrity she had imagined all her life. He looked like a man who carried a quiet gravity, someone who chose his words carefully, someone who saw more than most people did. Miss Morales, he said softly, his voice exactly as she remembered from that morning at the diner. He offered a hand, and she rose automatically, shaking it, stunned by the warmth in his palm. "Thank you for coming," he continued, gesturing for her to sit. "I know this must feel strange. I wanted to explain, face to face." Lena sat down, her nerves jangling. I don't understand why me. Why leave that envelope? Why help?" Keanu leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Because I saw something in you." That morning when the coffee spilled, most people would have panicked, maybe cursed, maybe walked away. You didn't. You stayed, you apologized even when you looked like you had nothing left to give. And then I noticed how you gave your attention to everyone else in that room, not yourself. You reminded me of someone I once knew. Someone who carried burdens quietly, but never stopped giving. Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say she was just a tired waitress, barely holding her life together. But the sincerity in his voice made her pause. "You work harder than anyone should," Keanu continued gently. "And I could tell there was more behind your eyes. Struggle, pain, determination. People like you are often invisible, but I see you." Tears pricked Lena's eyes before she could stop them. She gripped her hands together tightly. "But $10,000? That's more than I've ever held in my life. I don't know if I can accept it. I don't know if it's real." "It's real," Keanu said firmly, his gaze unwavering. "And it's only the beginning. The money isn't a gift to make you feel indebted. It's a bridge, a way to give you room to breathe while you face what's ahead. I know about your daughter, Maya. I know she needs surgery." Lena's breath hitched, her chest tightening. How could you possibly know that?" "I asked Daniel to do some quiet checking after I left the diner. I didn't want to invade your life, but I wanted to understand. And I did. You're carrying more than anyone should have to. I want to help." The room fell silent, except for the faint jazz drifting through the speakers. Lena stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe every word, but fear still clung to her ribs like chains. "Why?" she whispered finally. "Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" Keanu's expression softened, his voice steady but filled with weight. "Because once, I needed someone to see me when I felt invisible, and someone did. That moment changed everything. Now, when I see someone else standing on that same edge, I don't look away." Lena's tears spilled freely then, sliding down her cheeks. In that quiet hotel lounge, she realized her life had just stepped into something she couldn't yet name, and she understood one thing clearly. This was only the beginning. The silence stretched between them, thick with emotion Lena couldn't name. She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed, but Keanu didn't look away. He gave her space, as if he knew that too many words would only overwhelm her more. Finally, he reached into the leather bag, resting by his chair. He pulled out a simple manila folder and slid it across the table toward her. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, as though he wanted her to know nothing about this moment was rushed or casual. "What is this?" Lena asked, her voice hushed. "Something I want you to look at," he said gently, "but only if you're ready." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were neatly organized papers, clipped together in sections. The first page bore the letterhead of Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin. Her eyes caught on the words, surgical authorization, financial guarantee, full coverage of costs. Her chest tightened. She skimmed the lines, her pulse pounding louder with every word. This wasn't just some vague promise, it was real. Arrangements had already been made, paperwork filed, authorizations in place. Maya's surgery, the one Lena had been told was impossible without hundreds of thousands of dollars, was fully covered. Tears blurred the words until she had to press her palms to her eyes. This can't be real," she whispered. "It is," Keanu said quietly. "Your daughter will get the care she needs. You won't have to choose between food on the table and saving her life. That decision should never fall on any parent." Lena shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why me? There are so many children, so many families. Why us?" "Because I was in that diner," Keanu answered softly. "Because I saw you. And sometimes, one act of kindness, like giving your breakfast away, tells you more about someone's soul than a lifetime of conversation. Her throat ached as she turned to the next set of papers. This time it was an employment contract. She blinked in disbelief at the numbers listed for salary. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of making. Steady pay with health insurance, benefits, vacation days, a real job, not tips that barely covered rent. The contract listed the position, Program Coordinator, Reeves Foundation for Working Families. Her hands hovered above the page. She had never seen the words foundation and her own name anywhere near each other. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What would I even do?" Keanu leaned forward, his tone calm, reassuring. "You'd help run a foundation I started quietly years ago. It's designed to support people who work hard but get overlooked, people like you. Workers, single parents, people carrying the weight of the world and never catching a break. I want you to help find them, listen to them, and give them the tools to start again." Lena shook her head in disbelief. "I'm just a waitress. I don't have a degree." "I don't have experience." Keanu's gaze held hers firmly. "You have something better. You have lived it. You know what it feels like to scrape by, to pray for one more day of strength. That makes you more qualified than anyone I could hire." Lena pressed a hand to her mouth. Gratitude warred with fear. This wasn't just an envelope of cash anymore. This was a doorway into an entirely new life. Lena stared at the papers, her heart pounding as though the world had tilted beneath her feet. She tried to steady her breathing, but each line of text seemed heavier than the last. Surgery covered. A stable job. Benefits she had only ever heard about when other people spoke of good work. Her voice broke as she whispered, "What's the catch?" Keanu didn't flinch. He folded his hands on the table, his tone as steady as before. "The only condition is that you'd need to relocate. The foundation operates primarily out of San Antonio. It would mean leaving Austin, leaving the diner, and starting fresh. That's not a small thing to ask, I know." The word relocate thundered in her mind. She thought of Maya's bedroom, the drawings taped to the wall, the neighbor who brought soup when the nights were rough, the only home they had managed to hold on to these last 3 years. Could she uproot all of that? Could she drag her daughter away from the few threads of stability she still had? Keanu's voice softened. "I won't pretend it's easy. Change never is. But I believe you're stronger than the fear of it. And your daughter, she deserves a future. This could be the first step toward it." Lena swallowed hard, her gaze drifting back to the pages. Her eyes caught on the last item in the folder, a handwritten note on thick paper, folded neatly. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The words were simple, written in careful script. "Courage brought you this far. Courage will take you further. I believe in you. Do you believe in yourself?" Her vision blurred instantly. She pressed the paper to her chest, her breath ragged. Those words sliced through her fear like light through shadow. Nobody had ever written her a message like that. Nobody had ever told her they believed in her without asking for something in return. Still, her mind churned with doubt. "What if I fail?" she whispered. Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Then you learn, and you keep going. Failure isn't the end. It's a teacher. I didn't get where I am without falling more times than I can count. What matters is what you do after." His calm certainty unnerved her, but it also steadied something inside her that had been shaking for years. She thought of Maya, pale and fragile but still smiling, still believing in tomorrow. She thought of all the nights she had prayed for a miracle, never expecting one to arrive. And now here it was sitting on the table in front of her. Lena sat back, clutching the handwritten note, her pulse racing. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to sign the papers, to believe this was real, to step into a life where her daughter could finally breathe without pain. But a voice inside her whispered all the doubts she had carried for years. "What if I can't do it?" she asked quietly. "What if I don't belong in a place like this? I've spent my whole life scraping plates and pouring coffee. I don't know how to sit behind a desk or make big decisions." Keanu studied her carefully, his expression gentle but unyielding. Lena, belonging doesn't come from a job title. It comes from heart. You have more of that than most people I've ever met. That's why I trust you with this." She swallowed, her eyes flicking. Back to the first page. The surgical authorization. Maya's name was typed neatly across the top. Proof this wasn't a dream. The hospital. The doctors. The surgery scheduled. Waiting. All that stood between her daughter and a second chance was Lena's courage to step through the door. Her hands trembled as she closed the folder. San Antonio is far. I'd be leaving behind everything I know, Mrs. Ramirez, the only person who helps watch Maya, the diner, my coworkers. Even though life is hard here, it's still familiar. That's the hardest part, Keanu admitted. Letting go of the familiar, even when it's hurting you. But think about what you're trading it for. Safety, stability, a future not defined by fear, and the chance to help others like yourself. You won't just be surviving anymore, Lena. You'll be shaping lives. Her breath caught. The idea was overwhelming, almost too big to fit inside her chest. She imagined herself walking into an office in San Antonio, her name on the door, her daughter healthy beside her. It seemed impossible, but hadn't the envelope already proven that the impossible could happen? Keanu's eyes softened. You don't have to answer tonight. Take the folder. Read it carefully. Sleep on it. But I want you to know, this isn't charity. It's an opportunity. You've already proven your courage by surviving this long. The question is whether you're ready to keep moving forward. Lena nodded slowly, clutching the folder to her chest. She felt the weight of the papers, the promise, the risk, the hope. For the first time in years, the decision wasn't about how to survive tomorrow. It was about whether she had the courage to believe in a future. She whispered the words, almost too softly to hear. For Maya, I think I can. Keanu gave the faintest smile, the kind that held both gravity and warmth. Then, you're already halfway there. The folder felt heavier with every step Lena took up the stairwell to her apartment. Her mind spun in circles, torn between hope and fear. She let herself in quietly, set the folder on the kitchen counter, and glanced toward the couch. Maya was asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, cartoons still flickering on the muted television. Lena stood for a long time, watching her daughter breathe. She thought of the hospital papers, the guarantee of surgery. The word covered had felt like sunlight breaking through years of storm clouds. And yet, guilt gnawed at her. Could she really pull Maya away from everything familiar? From the neighbors who cared for her like family? From the fragile roots they had managed to grow in Austin? The next morning, after dropping Maya off at school, Lena carried the folder under her arm and climbed the stairs to the apartment next door. She knocked lightly. A shuffling sound came from inside. Then the door creaked open. "Lena?" Gloria's voice was warm, touched with surprise. The elderly woman, silver hair tucked into a bun, wore a floral housecoat. She had been their anchor ever since Daniel's accident, stepping in to babysit, to cook, to remind Lena she wasn't alone even when the world made her feel that way. "I need to talk," Lena said softly, holding up the folder. "Can I come in?" Gloria stepped aside immediately. "Of course, mija. Sit down. You look like you're carrying a mountain on your back." They settled at the small kitchen table, a bowl of oranges in the center. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, the way it always did in Gloria's home. Lena placed the folder on the table between them, staring at it, as though it might open by itself. "What's inside?" Gloria asked gently. Lena took a shaky breath. "An offer. A miracle. I don't know what to call it. Maya's surgery, it's covered, Gloria. Paid for. Everything we need. And a job. A real job. Enough to live on. But," her voice broke, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. Gloria reached over, covering Lena's hand with her own. Her skin was wrinkled, but her grip was steady. "But what, mija?" "It means leaving," Lena whispered. "Leaving Austin. Moving to San Antonio. Leaving you. Leaving everything we've built here, even if it's not much. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I should." Gloria studied her face, her eyes clear and steady. "Tell me everything. Don't hold back." Lena opened the folder, sliding the papers across the table. Gloria read slowly, lips moving over the words. With each page, her eyes widened, not with doubt, but with awe. When she reached the handwritten note at the back, she read it aloud softly. "Courage brought you this far. Courage will take you further. I believe in you. Do you believe in yourself?" The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Gloria looked up. "So, what's holding you back?" Lena dropped her gaze to the table. "What's holding me back? Everything. What if it's a mistake? What if Maya doesn't adjust? What if we move and I fail at this job, and then I've thrown away the only life we know? At least here, I understand the struggle. There, it's all unknown." Gloria reached for one of the oranges from the bowl, rolling it slowly in her hands before peeling it. "Mija, do you remember when you first moved into this building? You were scared then too. You told me you couldn't make it alone after Daniel passed, but look at you now. You've kept a roof over your daughter's head, food on the table, and love in her heart. You've already walked through fire." Lena shook her head, tears pricking her eyes. "But this is different. This isn't just survival. This is a whole new life being handed to me." "I don't know if I deserve it." Gloria chuckled softly, sliding half the orange toward her. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. People spend their lives waiting for miracles, and when one finally shows up, they're too afraid to grab it. That's what fear does. It dresses itself up as humility and whispers that you're not worthy. But I see you, Lena. I've watched you fight every day, even when you had nothing left. If anyone deserves this, it's you." Lena picked at the orange slice, her hands trembling. "What about you? You've been the only family we've had since Daniel died. Maya loves you. I can't imagine leaving you behind." Gloria's eyes softened. "And do you think I'd ever want Maya to lose her chance at life just so I can keep her close? No, Mija. The people who love you want you to take this chance. Don't let fear keep you trapped." Her words cut straight through the fog of Lena's doubt. Still, guilt lingered, heavy and suffocating. "But what about this community? The neighbors, the church down the street, the families who look out for us. If I leave, it feels like I'm abandoning them, like I'm turning my back on the only people who've stood by us." Gloria leaned closer, her voice steady and firm. "Helping them doesn't mean chaining yourself here. Sometimes the best way to honor the people who supported you is to grow beyond what they could give you. If you step into this new life, think of how many more families you can help through that foundation. Your story doesn't end here, Lena. It starts here." The words sank deep, though Lena's heart still resisted. She looked at the folder again, then at Gloria, her anchor, her guide. "I want to believe that," she whispered, "but I don't know if I'm strong enough." Gloria took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "You've already proven you are. Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward, even when you are. And you, my dear, have been doing that all along." Lena let the silence linger, Gloria's hand still wrapped around hers. She wanted to soak in every ounce of that strength, because deep down, she knew the decision was already forming inside her. But doubt kept clawing at her chest. "What if people think I'm just running away?" Lena whispered. "What if they say I abandoned them? I don't want Maya growing up thinking her mom walked away from everyone who cared for her." Gloria shook her head, her expression firm. "Running away is when you leave out of fear. But this is stepping forward out of love. Don't confuse the two. You're not leaving because you don't care. You're leaving because you do care about Maya's life, about her chance to grow up strong, and about the people you'll help in the future." The words hit Lena like a wave. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "I've been afraid for so long," she admitted. "Afraid of failing, afraid of not being enough. And sometimes it feels easier to stay where it hurts, because at least I know the pain." Gloria's eyes softened. "Yes, Mija. Pain is familiar, but it isn't a home. You've been living in survival for years, but survival is not living. Keanu is giving you a door out of that. The question is whether you have the courage to walk through it. Lena thought of the note again. Courage brought you this far. Courage will take you further. The words echoed now with Gloria's voice layered over them, pulling her toward a choice she was terrified to make but knew she had to. What if I say yes? Lena asked in a small voice. What happens then? Gloria smiled faintly. Then you pack your bags. Then you start fresh. And when Maya wakes up one day, after that surgery, with no pain in her chest, you'll look back and thank God you didn't let fear win. Lena squeezed Gloria's hand hard, clinging to her like the last thread of the life she knew. I don't know how to say goodbye to this place. You don't have to, Gloria said, because the people who love you will always be with you, no matter the miles. And I'll be here cheering you on, even if you're far away. For the first time, Lena allowed herself to imagine it clearly. Maya laughing, running, breathing freely. Herself working in an office where her voice mattered. A future where their lives weren't defined by scarcity but by hope. Her tears slowed, her breathing steadied. She looked into Gloria's eyes and whispered, "Then maybe it's time I start saying yes." Gloria smiled, her grip firm and reassuring. That's my girl. That evening, after dinner dishes were rinsed and stacked in the sink, Lena sat on the worn couch in their small apartment and called Maya over. The little girl climbed onto the cushion beside her, clutching her stuffed rabbit the way she always did when she sensed something serious was about to be said. Lena brushed a strand of hair out of her daughter's eyes. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something important. It's about your health. And about our lives. Maya blinked, her expression cautious. Is it about my heart again? Yes, baby, Lena whispered, her voice catching. You know how we've been waiting and saving for your surgery? Well, we don't have to wait anymore. The surgery is scheduled in just 2 weeks. Dr. Patel will do it at Dell Children's, and all the costs are covered. Every single thing. Maya's eyes widened, her mouth forming a perfect circle of surprise. Really? Covered? All of it? All of it, Lena confirmed, tears brimming in her eyes. The hospital, the doctors, the medicine, the recovery, everything. For a moment, pure joy lit up Maya's face. She bounced slightly on the couch, her stuffed rabbit bobbing with her movements. That means I can finally play at recess again? And run with the other kids and not get so tired? Yes, sweetheart, Lena said, cupping her daughter's cheek. That means exactly that. You'll have the chance to do all those things. But then, Maya's excitement dimmed, replaced by suspicion. She tilted her head. But how? You said it would take years before we had enough money. What happened? Lena hesitated, her fingers tightening around her daughter's hand. Something unexpected happened. Someone offered to help us, and along with your surgery, they offered me a new job. One that pays well, has health insurance, and lets me take care of you the way I've always wanted to. Maya frowned. That sounds good. But what's the catch? Lena's chest tightened. She admired her daughter's sharpness, her ability to cut straight through things adults sometimes avoided. The job isn't here in Austin, Lena explained softly. It's in San Antonio. We would have to move after your surgery. A new apartment, a new school, a whole new place to call home. Maya froze, hugging her stuffed rabbit tighter. Move? She repeated, her voice small. Like, leave here? Leave. Mrs. Ramirez? Leave Daddy's pictures on the wall? Lena's throat ached as she nodded. Yes, baby. We'd take the pictures with us, of course, but we wouldn't live here anymore. We'd start over in San Antonio. Maya's lower lip trembled. But Daddy lived here. If we move, won't that make it like he never existed? Lena gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her close as her own tears fell silently. No, baby. We carry him with us. Everywhere we go, his love comes with us. Moving doesn't erase him. It just gives us a chance to keep living the life he'd want for us. Maya sniffled against her shoulder. I don't want to forget him. You won't, Lena promised. I'll make sure of it. Maya pulled back from her mother's arms, her small face set in a stubborn frown. But what about my friends? What about school? I finally learned where everything is, and Mrs. Clark says I'm doing better in reading. If we move, I'll have to start over. What if nobody likes me? Lena smoothed her daughter's hair, aching at the fear in her voice. I know, sweetheart. Making new friends is scary, but you're one of the kindest, funniest, bravest girls I've ever known. Wherever you go, people will see that. They'll want to be your friend. It might take time, but it will happen. Maya pressed her rabbit to her chest. What if it doesn't? What if they all think I'm weird? What if I get left out again? You won't, Lena said firmly, though her own heart trembled. And even if it feels lonely sometimes, you'll never be alone. I'll be right there with you, every step. And you'll have new teachers who will help you, just like Mrs. Clark does now. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then she whispered, "But what about Mrs. Ramirez? She helps me when you're working. Who will help us in the new place?" Lena's chest tightened at the thought of leaving their neighbor behind. That's one of the hardest parts, she admitted honestly. We'll miss her so much. But she told me, something wise home isn't just a place. It's the people you carry in your heart. Mrs. Ramirez will always be part of us, even if we don't see her every day. Maya's eyes glistened with tears, her small shoulders trembling. I don't want to say goodbye. I'm tired of goodbyes. Lena pulled her close again, her own tears spilling freely now. Oh, baby, I know. I'm tired of them too. But sometimes, goodbyes are the first step towards something better. This move means you'll have the surgery you need. It means I won't have to work 3 jobs anymore. It means I'll have more time to be with you. Maya sniffled, her fingers twisting the rabbit's worn ear. You'll be home more? Yes, Lena whispered, pressing her forehead to her daughter's. I'll tuck you in at night. I'll help you with homework. I'll be there for all the things I've missed. I don't want to just watch you grow up from the sidelines. I want to be there. For the first time since the conversation began, Maya's frown eased. She looked at her mother with wide, searching eyes. If we move, will Daddy still know where to find us? What if he's watching from heaven and he goes to the wrong place? Lena's heart cracked open. She cupped her daughter's face tenderly. Sweetheart, love doesn't get lost. If your daddy is watching, he doesn't need an address. He'll always find you. Always. Maya blinked back tears. You promise? With all my heart, Lena said. Maya's eyes searched her mother's face, her lips trembling as if holding back 1,000 more questions. Then she finally whispered, Mommy, are you scared too? Lena almost lied. She almost said no, that everything would be fine, that she was strong enough to handle it all. But when she looked into her daughter's tired, knowing eyes, she couldn't pretend anymore. Yes, baby, she admitted softly. I'm really scared. I've never done anything like this before. I don't know what it's going to be like in a new city. I don't know if I'll be good at the new job. And I'm scared of leaving the people who've helped us. Maya held her mother's hand tightly, her small fingers pressing against Lena's palm. Then, we'll be scared together. Her voice was quiet, but firm. If you're scared and I'm scared, we'll be scared as a team. Teams stick together, right? Lena's throat closed with emotion. She pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her as if she could anchor them both through the storm. Yes, sweetheart, we're a team. The best team. Maya leaned against her chest, her little body warm and fragile. So, we'll go. We'll move. We'll start over. As long as we're together, it's okay. Lena kissed the top of her daughter's head, tears running freely down her face. You're braver than I'll ever be, Maya. Thank you for helping me see it. For the first time in years, the crushing weight on Lena's chest lifted. The decision that had terrified her suddenly felt simple because it wasn't just hers to make. It belonged to both of them. And Maya had chosen courage. That night, Lena tucked her daughter into bed and lingered by her side. brushing back her hair until her breathing slowed and sleep carried her away. Then Lena stood in the quiet apartment, the envelope with its impossible promise still sitting on the table. She reached for her phone with steady hands. When the voice on the other end answered, calm and expectant, Lena spoke without hesitation. "This is Lena Morales. I've made my decision. I accept the offer." There was a pause, then warm words of affirmation. The details would follow tomorrow, but for now, the choice was sealed. Lena ended the call and sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and fear all at once. Change was coming fast, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. She felt ready. She looked down the hallway toward Maya's room. Her daughter was right. They would be scared together, and together, they would be brave enough to walk into a new life. The morning of the surgery arrived before Lena felt ready. She had barely slept, her nerves stretched tight as a wire. At 4 in the morning, she slipped quietly from bed, checked Maya's bag one more time, and folded the stuffed rabbit into it. When she finally woke Maya, her daughter blinked sleepily and whispered, "Is it today?" "Yes, sweetheart," Lena said, her voice trembling with both dread and hope. "It's today. Today your heart gets stronger." By 5:30, they were walking into Dell Children's Medical Center. The halls smelled of antiseptic and coffee, and the fluorescent lights made everything too bright. Lena clutched Maya's hand the whole way, her stomach twisting with every step. Nurses greeted them warmly, checking paperwork and guiding them into a pre-op room. Maya changed into a hospital gown, far too big for her, the fabric pooling around her thin frame. Dr. Patel entered soon after, calm and confident, his gentle presence a balm against Lena's terror. He knelt beside Maya's bed and explained the procedure once more, his voice reassuring. "We'll take good care of you, Maya. When you wake up, you'll feel different, stronger." Maya nodded bravely, but when Dr. Patel left, she gripped Lena's hand tighter. "I'm scared, Mommy." "I know," Lena whispered, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. "I'm scared too, but remember what we said. We'll be scared together, and I'll be right here waiting when you wake up." The time came faster than Lena wanted. A nurse appeared with kind eyes and a clipboard. "It's time." They began to wheel the bed toward the double doors of the operating wing. Lena walked beside it, holding Maya's hand until the nurse gently stopped her. "This is as far as you can go." Lena bent over, her tears spilling onto Maya's pillow. "I love you more than anything, baby girl. More than the whole world." Maya's voice was small, but steady. "I love you more than the whole galaxy." The doors swung closed. Lena stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the space where her daughter had been just moments before. She felt hollow, powerless. She made her way to the waiting room, where Gloria was already seated with a thermos of coffee and a rosary clutched in her hand. When she saw Lena, she stood and wrapped her in a fierce hug. "She's going to be fine, Mija. She's in God's hands now, and in Dr. Patel's. Both are strong hands." Soon after, 2 of Lena's co-workers from the diner walked in: Frank, the cook, and Beatrice, her manager. They had taken time off to be there. Frank carried a bag of muffins no one felt like eating. Beatrice squeezed Lena's shoulder and said, "We're not letting you sit through this alone." Lena sat with them, the clock on the wall becoming both her enemy and her anchor. Every tick dragged her deeper into the longest day of her life. The first update came at 7:30. A nurse in light blue scrubs entered the waiting room and called Lena's name. Her heart leapt into her throat. She stood so fast, her chair scraped against the floor. "Everything is going well," the nurse said kindly. "Dr. Patel has begun the main procedure. Maya is stable." Relief crashed over Lena, but it was thin and fleeting, like a wave that disappeared as soon as it touched the shore. She nodded, thanking the nurse, and sat back down. Her hands still trembled. Time crawled. At 8:15, Gloria began praying softly under her breath, her rosary beads clicking faintly in her hands. Frank tried to distract everyone by telling a story about the time the grill at the diner broke during a Saturday rush, but his voice cracked halfway through and he stopped. Beatrice sat close to Lena, occasionally touching her arm, grounding her with small gestures of comfort. At 9 o'clock, another nurse appeared, still steady. We're about halfway through. Halfway. Lena clung to that word like a lifeline, though the other half stretched before her like a mountain she didn't know how to climb. She pressed her hands together and whispered, "Hold on, baby. Just hold on." The minutes turned into hours. She tried reading an old magazine from the table, but the words blurred. She tried sipping coffee, but it tasted like ash. She tried pacing, but her legs felt too heavy. Every thought spiraled back to the operating room, where she imagined her little girl surrounded by machines, her small heart in the hands of strangers. By 10:30, she was unraveling. Her chest ached from holding her breath. She stared at the clock, willing the hands to move faster, but every second stretched impossibly long. Gloria put her arm around Lena's shoulders, whispering, "Courage, mija. This is the hardest part. You've already given her your strength. She'll carry it through." At 11, Beatrice left briefly and returned with fresh sandwiches from a cafe. No one touched them. Lena barely noticed the bag on the table. She couldn't imagine swallowing food while her daughter lay on a table cut open. At noon, another nurse appeared. Lena nearly collapsed before the words came. "She's doing well. Dr. Patel says things are progressing smoothly. Another hour or two, and they should be finishing." Lena sat down heavily, tears welling in her eyes. She looked around the waiting room at Gloria, Frank, and Beatrice. Their presence was a fragile shield holding her together. Without them, she wasn't sure she could survive the waiting. The hours dragged on, each one heavier than the last. She gripped Maya's stuffed rabbit, tucked into her purse, holding it against her chest like a talisman. She whispered again and again, "Stay with me, baby girl. Please stay with me." It was nearly 1:30 when the double doors at the far end of the waiting room opened again. Dr. Patel walked through, still in his scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck. Lena jumped to, her feet, her chest seizing. She searched his face for clues, terrified to breathe. He stopped in front of her, his expression solemn for a moment before it broke into a warm smile. "She's perfect," he said simply. "The surgery went beautifully. Her heart is strong. Everything is working just as it should." Lena's knees buckled. Gloria and Beatrice caught her on either side as sobs broke free from deep in her chest. She covered her mouth, shaking with relief. Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You can see her soon. She's in recovery now. It may take a little while for her to wake, but she's doing very, very well." "Thank you," Lena whispered, though the words felt too small. "Thank you for giving her back to me." "Don't thank me," Dr. Patel said kindly. "Thank your daughter. She's braver than most adults I've ever met." When the nurse finally came to lead her back, Lena walked the hallway in a daze, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, gratitude, and awe. She stepped into the recovery room, and there was Maya, tiny against the white sheets, tubes and wires everywhere, but her cheeks had color again. The steady beep of the monitor was like music, each beat a promise of life. Lena sank into the chair beside the bed, taking her daughter's hand carefully in hers. It was warm, alive, steady. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "I'm here, baby, just like I promised." Minutes stretched until finally, Maya's eyes fluttered open. Her voice was faint, raspy. "Mommy?" "I'm here," Lena said, quickly, leaning close. "I never left." Maya blinked slowly, her gaze finding her mother's face. "Is it done? Does my heart work now?" Lena's tears spilled again, but this time they were tears of joy. She kissed her daughter's hand and whispered, "Perfectly. Your heart works perfectly." A small, sleepy smile touched Maya's lips before her eyes closed again. Lena stayed there, clutching her hand, breathing in the miracle she had prayed for so long. The storm of fear that had ruled her life for years was finally breaking. For the first time, in what felt like forever, Lena allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The weeks after the surgery passed, in a haze of recovery and preparation. Maya grew stronger each day, her cheeks flushed with color that Lena had almost forgotten she could have. The apartment was filled with the sound of her laughter again, light and playful, no longer weighed down by exhaustion. But as joy returned, so did the reality of the looming change. Boxes began to pile up in the living room. Old toys, dishes, and clothes were packed away carefully, each item a memory. The apartment echoed differently now, half empty and waiting for goodbye. Lena tried to keep herself busy with sorting and labeling, but every so often she would pause and stare at the walls, remembering how many nights she had stood in this same space, worrying over bills or crying herself to sleep. Gloria came over nearly every afternoon to help. Her hands were slower than they once were, but she taped boxes, folded clothes, and kept Maya entertained with stories from her own youth. She told Lena, "Every box you pack is one step closer to a better life. Don't cry for what you're leaving. Smile for what you're walking toward." Still, when the final week came, Lena felt the heaviness of departure settle over her like a shadow. The diner crew threw her a farewell dinner. Frank grilled steaks out back, while Beatrice handed Lena a card filled with handwritten notes from every employee. Some thanked her for her kindness. Others reminded her of the long nights they'd survived together. Inside the card was a collection of cash, everyone pitching in to help her start fresh. Lena tried to refuse, but Beatrice shook her head. "This isn't charity, it's family. You've given so much to this place. Let us give something back." Tears streamed down Lena's cheeks as she hugged them all. The goodbye was harder than she imagined. Every corner of the diner held a memory-burnt coffee, laughter during slow nights, the comfort of routine when everything else was falling apart. Now, she was letting it go. The last night in the apartment was the hardest. Lena and Maya slept on the floor in sleeping bags, the furniture already moved out. The bare walls seemed to whisper with memories. Maya curled against her mother, clutching Mr. Whiskers, her stuffed rabbit. "It feels empty," she said softly. Lena kissed her forehead. "It won't feel empty tomorrow. Tomorrow will fill a new place with new memories." At dawn, Gloria came to see them off. She pressed a small cross into Lena's hand, the one she'd worn for years around her neck. "For protection," she said firmly, "and a reminder you are never walking alone." Lena hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of lavender soap that always clung to Gloria's clothes. "I don't know how to leave you," Lena whispered. "You're not leaving me," Gloria said, her eyes misty. "I'll always be with you, and you'll always be with me. Now go, live the life you and Maya deserve." By 8 o'clock, the car was packed. Suitcases, boxes, and bags were stacked neatly in the trunk. Maya climbed into the back seat, her face pale with nerves, but lit by a spark of excitement. She looked out the window at the only home she'd ever known, then whispered, "Goodbye, old house." Lena turned the key in the ignition, her hands trembling. The engine hummed to life. She took one last look at the apartment building, at the cracked sidewalk where Maya had learned to ride her bike, at the balcony where she had stood countless nights staring at the stars, wondering if life would ever get better. Then she pulled out of the lot, heading toward San Antonio and the unknown. The road stretched wide before them, the early sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Maya leaned forward in her seat, her voice small but certain. "Mommy, this feels like the beginning of an adventure." "Yes," Lena said softly, her throat tight with emotion. "That's exactly what it is." The road unfolded hour after hour, carrying them away from everything familiar. Lena kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, her heart pulled between sorrow and hope. The highway shimmered in the Texas sun, dotted with trucks and travelers, but inside the car, it felt like their own little world. Maya sat in the back humming to the radio, pointing out cows and fields, gas stations with funny signs, and little towns they had never heard of. Sometimes she grew quiet, staring out at the endless sky. "Do you think Daddy would like San Antonio?" she asked at one point. Lena's chest tightened. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching her daughter's serious eyes. "I think he'd be proud of us, no matter where we go. He'd want you to have every chance to grow strong." Maya smiled faintly and leaned her head against the window. "Then I think I'm ready." They stopped once for lunch at a roadside diner. The smell of fried food and fresh coffee filled the air, reminding Lena of all the shifts she'd worked. But this time, she wasn't serving. She was sitting with her daughter, laughing as Maya devoured a grilled cheese and dipped her fries in too much ketchup. The simple act felt like a sign that life was turning. By late afternoon, the skyline of San Antonio appeared in the distance, rising like a promise. The tall buildings reflected sunlight, and palm trees lined the highways as they neared the city. Lena's stomach knotted with nerves. She had dreamed of this moment, yet it felt impossible that it was real. The directions led them to a quiet neighborhood with neat sidewalks, trimmed grass, and rows of apartment complexes. When Lena pulled into the parking lot of their new home, Maya pressed her hands against the glass. "It looks beautiful," she whispered. The building was clean and modern, with fresh paint and wide staircases. Lena unlocked the door, her hands trembling. The apartment smelled faintly of new carpet and fresh paint. Sunlight poured through large windows. The living room was furnished with a gray sofa, a wooden coffee table, and soft curtains that swayed with the breeze. But it was Maya's room that made Lena cry. The twin bed was covered in a soft lavender comforter. A desk was tucked beneath the window. A bookshelf lined with colorful storybooks. On the wall hung a framed picture of a heart-shaped balloon. Maya gasped and ran to the bed, touching everything at once. "It's perfect," she said, her voice filled with awe. Lena stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "For the first time in years," she whispered, "we're home." The following week brought another turning point. Lena received a simple message on her new work phone. "Tomorrow at 3 p.m. office on Houston Street. Keanu will meet you there." It was signed by Dr. Patel, who had been coordinating everything since the surgery. Lena stared at the message for a long time. She had seen Keanu in the diner that morning when her life began to change, and once more in the hotel lounge when he first revealed his quiet support. But now, this meeting would be different. There would be no envelopes left behind, no assistant smoothing the way. It would be just her and him, face to face, in a private conversation that could shape the rest of her life. She hardly slept the night before. She kept replaying questions in her mind. Why her? Why now? What if she disappointed him? Every fear pressed down on her, the same way they had when she worried over bills or Maya's health. Yet beneath it all, there was a flicker of something new, a fragile sense of worth she hadn't felt in years. At exactly 2:45 p.m., Lena parked her car outside the address she'd been given. The building wasn't glamorous. It was an older brick structure downtown, tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. There were no big logos, no flashy security, just a glass door with a small sign that read, "Foundation Offices." Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of paper and coffee. A woman at the desk smiled and asked her to wait. Within minutes, another assistant guided Lena down a short hallway to a door at the end. She paused there, nerves buzzing in her stomach. The assistant opened the door quietly, and there he was. Keanu stood by the window, sunlight streaming across his shoulders. The office was nothing like she expected. It wasn't polished or cold. It was warm, almost home-like. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with novels and biographies. Framed photographs sat on the shelves, some of Keanu with friends, some of landscapes, some of ordinary people Lena didn't recognize. A soft rug covered the wooden floor, and two armchairs faced each other near the window. Keanu turned when she entered. His expression was calm, his presence steady, like he carried no rush in his body at all. "Lena," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, her throat suddenly tight. "Thank you for asking me to." He gestured toward one of the chairs. "Sit, please. This isn't a business meeting, just a conversation." Lena sank into the chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. She had expected something formal, maybe intimidating. Instead, the atmosphere felt like an invitation to breathe. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, Keanu leaned forward slightly. "I imagine you've been wondering why." Lena let out a shaky laugh. "Every single day." He smiled faintly. "Then let me tell you, that morning in the diner, I saw things most people would have missed. You spilled coffee on me, yes, But that wasn't the important part. What mattered was how you handled it. No excuses, no defensiveness. Just a sincere apology and a determination to make it right. Lena blinked, remembering how embarrassed she had been, how she had rushed for napkins with her heart racing. "That's just basic decency," she murmured. "No," Keanu said softly. "That's leadership, taking responsibility even when it hurts. People underestimate how rare that is." Her eyes stung, but she stayed quiet, listening. "And before that," he continued, "I watched you give away your breakfast to a man outside. You didn't know anyone was looking. You were tired, clearly worn down, but you still chose kindness when no one would have faulted you for keeping it for yourself." Lena swallowed hard. She remembered that morning, slipping the plate to a homeless man she recognized from the neighborhood. It hadn't felt like anything extraordinary at the time, just something she couldn't ignore. "That," Keanu said, his gaze steady, "is heart. Everything else can be taught. Skills, training, systems, all of that can be learned. But integrity, compassion, the ability to see people when the world overlooks them, that can't be faked." Lena's chest tightened. "But I'm not. I'm just a waitress. I barely got through high school. I don't have what people in offices have." "You have exactly what matters," Keanu said. "And I believe the foundation we're building needs that more than anything." Lena shifted in her chair, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe his words, but doubt clung like a shadow. "Why me, though? There must be so many people more qualified, people with degrees and experience." Keanu leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "Qualifications can fill a resume, but lived experience shapes character. You've survived things that would break most people, and you did it without becoming bitter. You worked 3 jobs. You raised Maya alone after loss. You didn't just endure, you kept your kindness intact. That's not common." His words sank into her chest like heavy stones, both grounding and overwhelming. She thought of the endless nights waiting tables, of counting crumpled tips to stretch through rent and medicine, of pretending she wasn't scared when Maya asked about the future. To her, it had always felt like failure, like she hadn't done enough. Yet here he was, describing it as strength. "You see weakness," Keanu said quietly, almost as if reading her thoughts. "I see resilience. You see exhaustion. I see discipline. You think you were invisible, but I noticed." Lena's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, as if the most ordinary parts of her life were actually extraordinary. For a moment, she couldn't answer, afraid her voice would break. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how to live up to that." "You don't have to," Keanu replied, his tone steady and warm. "You already are. That's why you're here. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real." The room fell quiet again, but this time, Lena felt something different. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a fragile spark of belief began to glow, small but alive. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Lena woke early in the small San Antonio apartment that had already started to feel like a home. Maya was still asleep, breathing softly in her own room, surrounded by new books and the comfort of her decorated space. Lena stood for a long moment in the hallway, looking at her daughter's door, whispering to herself, "This is why." She dressed carefully, choosing black slacks and a pressed blouse she had ironed the night before. She no longer looked like the woman who once shuffled between shifts at the diner and the late-night cleaning job. She looked professional. Nervous, yes, but standing straighter than before. She kissed Maya goodbye, promising to call at lunch, and walked out into the cool morning air. The office wasn't far, tucked into a renovated building downtown. A discreet sign read, "Foundation for Working Class Innovation." The name still felt unreal. When Lena pushed open the door, the receptionist greeted her with a smile and handed her a visitor badge until her permanent one was ready. A few minutes later, Dr. Patel appeared in the lobby to escort her upstairs. "This is your space now," he said as they stepped into a modest but bright office suite. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. At the far end of the room was a small open workspace with 3 people waiting. Dr. Patel introduced them one by one. This is Travis Wilson, technology specialist. A tall, lanky man in his mid-20s stood and shook Lena's hand eagerly. His smile was wide, and he wore a t-shirt with a rocket design under his blazer. I'll be setting up systems to track applications, outreach, and data. Basically, anything digital, I'll handle. Next was Simone Foster, operations manager. She was in her 50s, with silver hair tied neatly in a bun, sharp glasses, and the kind of calm authority Lena had always admired. Simone's handshake was firm. I'll guide you through the administrative side budgets, approvals, contracts. Think of me as the anchor that keeps everything steady. Finally, Marcus Bell stepped forward. Broad-shouldered with a warm presence, he looked to be in his 40s. I'm an engineer by trade, but I volunteer here part-time. My role is to help evaluate ideas from a technical perspective. Some concepts might be too ambitious, others could change entire industries. I'll help sort the difference. Lena smiled nervously, murmuring greetings to each of them. For a moment, she felt out of place. They all seemed so polished, so sure of themselves. But then Simone gestured toward a chair at the head of the table. "This is your team, Lena. Why don't you sit?" Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected that phrase, your team. For years, she had been the one following orders, rushing to refill coffee cups or mop floors at someone else's command. Now, people were waiting for her to speak. She sat down slowly, folding her hands together on the table to keep them steady. Dr. Patel began. "Your role, Lena, is the heart of this program. You're not here to push papers or crunch numbers. You're here to find people like yourself, hardworking individuals with ideas no one else notices. You'll talk to them, listen to them, and bring forward those who deserve a chance." The words landed heavily, but also with a strange clarity. It was exactly what Keanu had told her before. Her lived experience was not a weakness, but the very reason she was here. Simone leaned in, her expression encouraging. "We'll support you every step of the way, but the insight comes from you. Where do you think we should begin?" Lena hesitated. She looked at the three faces turned toward her. This was the moment to shrink back or step forward. She took a breath. "We start where people like me work. Diners, warehouses, grocery stores. Places that keep the world running but get ignored. That's where the ideas are hiding." Travis's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. Ground-level innovation." Marcus nodded firmly. "Exactly. You know those places better than any of us." And for the first time, Lena felt the shift. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone trusted with responsibility, someone whose voice mattered. The meeting stretched on, not with rigid formality, but with genuine curiosity. Travis opened his laptop, already sketching out a simple digital form that people could fill out online. "It doesn't have to be complicated," he explained, "just a way for people to share their ideas quickly. We can refine later." Simone jotted notes on her tablet, occasionally glancing at Lena as though to make sure she was still comfortable. "Once we get applications, we'll need a system for follow-ups. Background checks, cost estimates, feasibility. Don't worry, we'll handle that part. You just bring the people." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady and warm. "You know what to look for, Lena. Someone who sees problems others ignore. Someone who talks about fixing things, not just surviving them. That's your strength." Lena nodded, her pulse quickening. She thought about the tired men and women she used to serve coffee to at the diner, the factory workers who came in for cheap breakfasts before long shifts, the single mothers with second jobs who always tipped what they could. They had stories, struggles, and ideas. Maybe no one else had listened. But she could. She cleared her throat, her voice steadier than before. "I think I'll start by going back to the places I know best. Diners, corner stores, laundromats. If we want to find overlooked ideas, we need to be where overlooked people live their lives." Simone smiled, her expression full of approval. "That's exactly the kind of thinking this foundation needs." For the first time, Lena felt a flicker of pride rise above her nerves. She wasn't pretending to belong anymore. She was beginning to believe she did. When the meeting ended, Lena lingered in the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly. She paused by a window overlooking the city, sunlight warming her face. Just weeks ago, she had been collapsing into bed after double shifts, certain her world would never change. Now, people were trusting her with something bigger than herself. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was joined by something stronger: hope. She thought of Maya, smiling in her new room, and whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." For the first time in years, she believed it. The first weeks on the job were a blur of introductions, community visits, and long conversations in places most people overlooked. Lena returned to the spaces she once knew well, not as an exhausted worker this time, but as someone looking for sparks of possibility. She carried a notebook in her purse and a quiet determination in her heart. Every time she sat down across from someone, she remembered Keanu's words: "Leadership is responsibility and heart." Her first discovery happened in a warehouse on the south side of the city. The air was thick with dust, the sound of machines echoing through the concrete walls. Workers in steel-toed boots moved boxes and operated forklifts, their movements quick but tired. Lena had asked Marcus to join her on this visit, wanting his engineer's eye alongside her listening ear. During a break, she struck up a conversation with a man named Hector, a middle-aged worker with calloused hands and a weary but friendly smile. At first, Hector waved her off, saying he didn't have anything worth sharing. But Lena pressed gently, asking what he would change about his job if he could. That's when his eyes lit up. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. On it was a crude sketch of a redesigned lifting harness. He explained how the current equipment strained workers' backs, leading to injuries. His version redistributed the weight, using simple pulleys and wider straps. "I've tested it on my own during shifts," he admitted quietly. "It works, but no one listens when I suggest changes. They think I'm just a laborer." Marcus studied the sketch, his eyebrows lifting. "This isn't just workable," he said. "It's smart, very smart." Hector shrugged, embarrassed, but Lena leaned forward. "You saw a problem. You created a solution. That matters. Let's take this further." The foundation gave Hector a small grant to build a prototype. Within weeks, injuries at the warehouse decreased when workers tested. His design. It wasn't just safer, it gave Hector a sense of pride he'd never known. He wasn't invisible anymore. Lena carried that momentum into her second discovery. This time, it was late at night in a nearly empty high school cafeteria where she met James, an overnight janitor. He was soft-spoken, with tired eyes, and a laptop that looked older than some of the students he cleaned after. During a casual conversation, he mentioned he played around with coding. Curious, Lena asked what he meant. Hesitant at first, James showed her an app he had built entirely on his own. The app helped immigrant families navigate healthcare paperwork by translating complex terms into simple, understandable steps. "I work nights," he explained, "but when I finish mopping floors, I stay a few hours to code. I've seen too many people get lost in the system. I wanted to make something that could help." Lena was stunned. Here was a man cleaning hallways for minimum wage, yet building something that could transform lives. With Travis's technical support, the foundation funded James to refine his app, adding better features and security. Within a few months, his tool had hundreds of users. Soon after, it spread by word of mouth to thousands. Watching James present his work in a small meeting room, shy but passionate, Lena felt something shift inside her. This wasn't charity. It was justice, restoring dignity to people who had always been underestimated. Her third discovery came closer to home, in a grocery store where she used to stretch every dollar of her paycheck. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she talked with Yolanda, a cashier who had worked there for nearly 15 years. Yolanda was cheerful, always smiling at customers, but underneath her patience lay frustration at the waste she saw every day. "You wouldn't believe how much food gets thrown away," Yolanda said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Perfectly good produce, just because it doesn't look nice." I started keeping track of the patterns. Certain items always expire at the same time. If we adjusted ordering, we could save money and feed more families. She pulled out a notebook filled with numbers, charts, and hand-drawn tables. It wasn't polished, but it was meticulous. Yolanda had logged months of data, identifying cycles the store ignored. Lena's heart swelled as she listened. You've been solving a problem no one else even looked at. With Simone's help, the foundation funded a pilot program using Yolanda's system in 2 local stores. Within weeks, food waste dropped by nearly 20%. More importantly, leftover items were rerouted to community pantries instead of landfills. Yolanda's smile grew wider every time she heard about a family leaving with full bags of groceries. 3 people, 3 overlooked lives, 3 powerful ideas. And all of them had been waiting for someone to notice. Back at the office, Lena gathered with her team around the small conference table. She laid out Hector's prototype, James's updated app screenshots, and Yolanda's notebooks. The room was quiet for a moment, as everyone took in the evidence of what had been accomplished in just a few short months. Travis grinned, tapping the table. This is exactly what we hoped for. Real people, real solutions. And it's only the beginning. Simone's voice was steady but warm. Do you see what's happening, Lena? You've already shifted lives. Hector works safer now. James is empowering entire families. Yolanda is feeding people who used to go hungry. You opened the door. Lena looked down at her hands, then around the room. She felt her throat tighten with emotion. For years, she had been ashamed of her exhaustion, of her struggle. Yet now those same struggles had become her strength. I didn't do this alone, she whispered. They were already brilliant. I just listened. Marcus leaned back with a proud smile. And that's the difference. You saw what others missed. That's leadership. For the first time, Lena didn't flinch at the word. She let it settle inside her. Fragile, but real. Word spread, quietly but steadily. Workers told friends, neighbors told families, and soon people Lena had never met were reaching out with ideas. Each story carried the same heartbeat, ordinary people daring to hope. Lena realized the cycle had begun. Kindness was multiplying, and she was helping guide its path. The sun was dipping low when Lena's phone buzzed with a short, direct message. Can you come by tomorrow afternoon? Office at 3. K. Her breath caught as soon as she read it. Keanu rarely asked to see her directly. Most updates came through Dr. Patel or her team. A personal request meant something important. She hardly slept that night, tossing between gratitude for how far she had come and fear that something might be wrong. The next day, she arrived early. The office felt unusually quiet as the receptionist led her down the familiar hallway. She could hear her own footsteps echoing on the polished floor. When she entered, Keanu was already there, sitting near the window with a cup of tea. Sunlight caught the lines of his face, and though his presence was steady, his eyes carried a seriousness that made Lena's stomach tighten. Lena? He greeted warmly, motioning to the chair across from him. Sit. I wanted to talk without distraction. She nodded, lowering herself into the seat, trying to steady her breathing. For a long moment, he simply studied her, as though weighing how to begin. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. He set it on the table between them. Her heart skipped. That envelope shape was burned into her memory. The very first one had changed everything, had pulled her from the brink of despair into a future she had never dared imagine. She stared at it now, almost afraid to touch it. Keanu's voice was gentle. The last time I handed you something like this, it was a test, a beginning. This time, it's something different. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, the paper cool against her skin. She slid her finger under the flap and unfolded the contents. For a second, the words on the page blurred as her eyes filled with tears. She blinked hard and read again. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a note of encouragement or instructions. It was a deed, the deed to her apartment. She looked up, stunned, her voice breaking. This can't be real. It's very real, Keanu said softly. That apartment is yours now. No landlord, no rent, no fear of losing it. A place for you and Maya that no one can take away. The words cracked something open inside her. For years, she had lived in a cycle of moving from one cheap rental to the next, always one paycheck away from eviction. Even now, In the new apartment provided by the foundation, she had never let herself fully believe it was permanent. She had trained herself not to get too attached, knowing stability could slip through her fingers at any moment. But this was different. This was ownership. This was security she had never dreamed of having. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched the paper to her chest. "I don't deserve this. I already owe you more than I can ever repay." Keanu leaned forward, his tone firm but kind. "Lena, you've worked harder than anyone I know. You've carried burdens most people wouldn't survive. And still, you've given back lifting others, finding talent, changing lives. You deserve more than survival. You deserve peace. And so does your daughter." Her shoulders shook as sobs broke free. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. No one had ever told her she deserved anything. For years, she had believed she was only meant to scrape by. Now, for the first time, someone had given her more than a chance. He had given her permanence. Keanu's voice softened. "Consider it not a gift, but a promise, a foundation. You can build anything when you know your home is safe." Lena sat frozen in her chair, the deed trembling in her hands. It felt heavier than paper, heavier than ink. It felt like a key that unlocked a part of her life she never thought she'd have access to. Her mind rushed to Maya, to the look on her daughter's face when she would tell her they would never again have to pack boxes in a hurry, never again fear a landlord's notice taped to the door. She lowered the document to her lap, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't even know how to explain this to Maya. She's lived her whole life thinking home was temporary, that it could vanish at any moment." Keanu nodded, his gaze steady. "That's exactly why I wanted you to have this. Children deserve to feel safe, to know they have roots. Maya deserves a childhood free of fear, and you deserve the dignity of a place that belongs to you." Lena's voice quivered. "When my husband passed, everything fell apart. I promised myself I'd somehow keep Maya safe, even if it meant losing pieces of myself along the way. But no matter how many hours I worked, it was never enough. I always felt like I was failing her. And now," she pressed the deed closer to her chest, "now I can finally tell her she's safe." Keanu leaned back slightly, a small, reassuring smile tugging at his lips. "You were never failing her, Lena. You were fighting against impossible odds, and you kept going. That's what made me notice you. That's what makes you extraordinary. This," he gestured to the paper in her hands, "is simply catching up with what you've already earned." She drew in a shuddering breath. The weight of gratitude was almost too much to carry. For so long, she had been told by life itself that she wasn't enough, that she would always live on the edge. Now, for the first time, she could imagine a future where she wasn't running, where her daughter could plant dreams in soil that wouldn't shift beneath her feet. That evening, Lena walked through the apartment door with the deed still clutched in her hand. Maya ran to greet her, but stopped when she saw her mother's tear-streaked face. "Mom, what happened?" Lena knelt, placing the paper in her daughter's hands. "This isn't just our apartment anymore. It's ours forever. No one can take it away." Maya's eyes widened. She threw her arms around her mother's neck, whispering, "We're really home?" Lena held her close, her heart overflowing. "Yes, baby, we're home." For the first time, she believed the word was permanent. The months that followed unfolded like a season of growth Lena had never imagined possible. What began as hesitant steps in a new role soon became a steady march, one that carried her into places and conversations she once thought belonged to other people. The Foundation's program expanded quickly, fueled by the first wins she had uncovered. News of Hector's harness, James's app, and Yolanda's food waste system rippled through local papers, then regional broadcasts. Each story carried Lena's name quietly in the background, an ordinary woman who had listened and lifted others. For the first time in her life, invitations started arriving. A manufacturing association in Dallas wanted her to speak about worker-driven innovation. A community college in Houston asked if she would share insights with students who felt overlooked. Even a national labor conference sent a request for her presence on a panel. Each time she read an invitation, Lena hesitated, doubt creeping in like an old shadow. She was still the woman who had once spilled coffee in a crowded diner. She didn't have polished words or formal degrees. But each time she thought of saying no, Maya would look at her with wide, proud eyes and whisper, "You can do this, Mommy." So, she said yes. Her first trip was to Dallas, where she walked nervously into a hotel ballroom filled with rows of chairs and curious faces. Simone had helped her prepare notes, but her palms still sweated as she stepped to the microphone. She scanned the audience and felt the familiar fear rising, the fear of being out of place. Then she remembered Hector's trembling hands when he had first shown her the sketch of his harness. She remembered James typing quietly in a dark cafeteria. She remembered Yolanda's notebooks filled with numbers. None of them had been polished. None of them had been celebrated before. They had simply been real. So Lena told their stories. She spoke about Hector's design, reducing injuries, about James giving power to families who struggle to navigate healthcare, about Yolanda turning waste into nourishment. Her voice steadied as she described what it meant to notice people no one else saw. She didn't use jargon or statistics. She used names, faces, and lived experiences. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before applause broke out loud, sustained, genuine. She felt her cheeks flush as people stood, clapping not just for her, but for the people she represented. It was the first time she believed she could belong in these spaces, not by pretending to be someone else, but by bringing her own truth. From there, her role grew. She traveled across Texas, then beyond, visiting warehouses in Oklahoma, farm towns in New Mexico, and urban neighborhoods in Chicago. Each stop was a reminder of the quiet brilliance hidden in everyday corners. She met a seamstress designing ergonomic uniforms for long shifts, a young mechanic with an invention to recycle motor oil, a teacher's aide who created low-cost learning tools for immigrant children. Each story fueled the mission. Each project became proof that overlooked people held the power to change communities when someone believed in them. And everywhere she went, Lena carried herself with more confidence, no longer shrinking when eyes turned toward her. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a voice. By the time autumn came, Lena had learned how to pack a suitcase quickly, how to adjust to new hotel rooms, and how to stand in front of strangers without trembling. Each trip carried a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She missed Maya during the nights away, but every video call reminded her why she was doing this. Maya would hold up her homework to the camera and say, "I told my teacher you're helping people like us." Hearing that, Lena knew the sacrifices were worth it. Her next major event was the community conference in Chicago. The organizers had given her the keynote slot, a position usually reserved for politicians or seasoned executives. The thought made her stomach twist, but she reminded herself of something Keanu had told her. The truth doesn't need a title. It just needs a voice. The hall was packed with hundreds of people, workers, union leaders, teachers, and families. Lena stood at the podium, her speech folded in her hands, though she barely glanced at it. Instead, she spoke from memory, from the reservoir of moments that had shaped her. She described the sound of clinking dishes in the diner, the way exhaustion felt after 3 shifts, the fear of opening an empty fridge. Then she shifted to the joy of watching Hector demonstrate his safer harness, the pride in James's voice when his app reached its 1,000th user, the tears in Yolanda's eyes when families walked out of the pantry with food that would have been wasted. She paused and looked across the audience. For too long, people like us have been told we're invisible, that our ideas don't matter, but I've seen proof with my own eyes. Innovation doesn't only live in boardrooms or laboratories. It lives in warehouses, classrooms, grocery stores, kitchens. It lives in people who survive and still dream. All we need is someone to listen. The applause that followed rolled like thunder. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, whistling. Some had tears in their eyes, nodding, as if she had given voice to something they had always known but rarely heard aloud. Afterward, attendees crowded around her, not to praise her, but to share their own stories. A bus driver told her about an idea for safer routes. A cafeteria worker explained a way to reduce cafeteria waste. A single father spoke of a tool he'd been building in his garage to help disabled neighbors. Lena listened, writing names and numbers in her notebook, promising to follow up. Back in her hotel room that night, she sat by the window overlooking the city lights. She thought of the journey, how a spilled cup of coffee had set all of this in motion. She thought of Keanu's words, of Gloria's wisdom, of Maya's bravery. And for the first time, she didn't feel like an imposter standing on borrowed ground. She felt like a leader standing on her own. The day of the summit dawned with a weight Lena felt in her chest from the moment she woke. It had been a year since her life had turned upside down. A year since she spilled coffee on a stranger in a crowded diner. Now that same stranger had invited her to stand at the center of something far larger than herself. The Foundation's first public summit was held in a repurposed auditorium in downtown San Antonio. Banners lined the entrance, bearing the words, "Innovation begins everywhere." Volunteers bustled through the halls, arranging chairs, testing microphones, and setting out programs. The audience list was staggering: workers, community leaders, corporate representatives, students, and journalists. Hundreds of people would be listening to her words, recording them, quoting them. Lena still couldn't believe she was the keynote speaker. Backstage, she paced with her note cards in hand, though she knew she wouldn't rely on them. Her palms were damp, her heartbeat uneven. She had spoken at conferences and gatherings before, but this moment felt different. This wasn't about one story or one idea. This was about declaring, publicly and boldly, that ordinary people carried extraordinary power. Maya, now stronger and healthier than ever, slipped backstage with Gloria by her side. The sight of them nearly broke Lena's composure. Maya hugged her tightly and whispered, "You've got this, Mom. I believe in you." Gloria's gentle smile carried the same reassurance. "The people who love you want you to take this chance. Don't let fear keep you trapped." When Lena finally stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded her for a moment. She could barely make out the sea of faces staring back. A hush fell over the room. Her throat felt dry, but she took a breath and began. "I want to start with the truth," she said, her voice trembling at first. "A year ago, I was a waitress. I worked 3 jobs. I was exhausted, invisible, and certain that my life was nothing more than surviving one day to the next." She paused, scanning the room. A few nods from audience members gave her courage. "Then one morning, I spilled coffee on a man I didn't recognize. I thought it was the worst moment of my week. But it became the moment that changed everything. That man chose to see me, not just my mistake. He saw worth in me that I couldn't see in myself. And because of that, my life and my daughter's life were transformed." Her voice steadied as she went on, speaking about Hector's harness, James's app, Yolanda's food system. She told stories of seamstresses, bus drivers, janitors, and teachers whose ideas were now flourishing because someone had listened. "I used to say I was just a waitress," she said, her tone gaining strength. "But I've learned there is no just when it comes to people who work hard and dream harder. Every voice matters. Every idea deserves a chance. And if someone like me can stand here today, then so can anyone else." The room erupted into applause, loud and unrelenting. Some people rose to their feet, clapping with tears streaming down their cheeks. Lena felt her knees tremble, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from awe. She let the sound wash over her, a wave of affirmation she had never known before. At the edge of the stage, just barely visible through the lights, Keanu stood quietly with his arms crossed. He didn't step forward or draw attention. He simply watched, a small smile on his face, his pride clear in the way his eyes shone. The applause faded slowly, replaced by an expectant silence. Lena steadied herself at the podium, pressing her hands to the wood to ground her. She felt the weight of the moment, but also its gift, the chance to speak for those who had never been given a stage. She leaned forward slightly, her voice more confident now. When people say innovation, they think of billion-dollar companies, laboratories, or suits in corner offices. But real innovation often begins with a question whispered by someone who thinks nobody's listening. a janitor asking how to fix a problem, a cashier wondering how to save food from waste, a warehouse worker sketching safety improvements on scrap paper. That's where transformation starts. Her words struck a chord. She saw heads nodding, eyes shining. I stand here not because I'm exceptional, but because someone believed ordinary lives hold extraordinary value. I was given a chance, and that chance became a doorway. And now it is our responsibility to hold that doorway open for as many others as possible. Her voice thickened with emotion as she closed. I used to wake every morning terrified of losing everything: my job, my home, my daughter's health. Today I wake with a different fear, that too many voices still go unheard. But together, we can change that. Together, we can build a world where no one is overlooked. The hall erupted again, this time louder, more forceful. People stood as one, clapping, cheering, stamping their feet. The sound rattled the walls, rolling over her like thunder. Lena pressed a hand to her heart, overwhelmed by the energy surging through the room. At the edge of the stage, Keanu caught her eye. He didn't move, didn't wave, but the small nod he gave was enough. It told her everything. She belonged. As Lena stepped off the stage, the roar of applause still echoing behind her, Maya rushed forward and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. "You were amazing," she whispered, her voice trembling with pride. Gloria followed, her eyes glistening. "I always told you, the people who love you want you to take this chance." Lena held them both, her throat too tight for words. She could feel the paper weight of the past, the years of exhaustion, the fear of eviction. The helpless nights at the diner slipped further away. For the first time, she wasn't defined by survival, but by purpose. Keanu approached quietly, offering only a simple smile. "You didn't just speak today," he said softly. "You led." Tears blurred Lena's vision again, but this time, they came with peace. She finally understood. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a voice for many. 5 years passed, and the world Lena once thought she would never leave behind now seemed like a distant echo. The days of carrying coffee pots through crowded diners, of collapsing into bed after 3 consecutive shifts, of praying that Maya's fragile heart could carry her just a little longer, all of it felt like another lifetime. What replaced it was a rhythm of steady purpose, of meaningful work, of hope that had not only taken root but bloomed into something extraordinary. The morning sun fell across Washington, D.C., where flags rippled against a cloudless sky. The White House lawn was alive with people, politicians, activists, educators, and workers who had been touched by the foundation Lena helped shape. A makeshift stage stood near the fountain, lined with chairs and cameras, ready to broadcast a moment that had been years in the making. Lena sat among the honorees, her heart pounding in her chest. She wore a navy blue suit, borrowed confidence in fabric form, but what steadied her most was the young girl sitting to her left. Maya, no longer the pale, fragile child who once whispered in fear about forgetting her father, had grown into a vibrant teenager with bright eyes and an easy smile. Her hair shone under the sunlight, and she wore a simple white dress. She looked healthier than Lena had ever dared dream she would. The announcer's voice rang out through the speakers, calling Lena's name. For her unwavering dedication to uplifting overlooked workers and her role in transforming lives across America, we present the National Medal of Service to Lena Morales. A swell of applause erupted. Lena froze, her breath catching in her throat. She felt Maya's hand slip into hers, a small squeeze that carried the weight of 5 years of battles won. With her daughter by her side, Lena stood and walked toward the stage. Each step was heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what it meant. She remembered the very beginning, the envelope with her name on it, the impossible choice, the night she cried with Maya on Gloria's couch. She remembered the surgery day when every second in the waiting room stretched like eternity. And she remembered the quiet office where Keanu had looked at her and said, "That's leadership. That's heart." Now she was standing before an audience of thousands, her story no longer hidden in the walls of a diner. The medal was placed around her neck, its weight cool and grounding. She turned toward the audience and saw faces beaming, clapping, crying. Workers she had once met in warehouses and diners were there too, flown in from different states, each of them proof that the mission had been real. In the second row, away from the cameras, she spotted him. Keanu sat quietly, his hands folded, no spotlight on him, no speech, no attention drawn. But when their eyes met, he gave her the smallest nod, a gesture that said everything. Pride, affirmation, and the reminder that the journey was hers, but never alone. Lena gripped the edges of the podium, her voice trembling as she began to speak. I used to believe my story ended behind a counter, carrying trays and praying for enough tips to make rent. But someone saw more in me when I couldn't see it myself. Today, I wear this medal, but it doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every worker who ever felt invisible, every mother who fought for her child, every hand that held me up when I thought I couldn't go on. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Maya clapped the hardest, her smile wide, her eyes glistening. When the ovation finally quieted, Lena looked down at the medal resting against her chest. Its golden shine caught the light, but what it represented mattered far more than the medal itself. It was proof that pain could be reshaped into purpose, that exhaustion could become fuel, that even a woman who once spilled coffee in fear could stand on a national stage with dignity. She glanced at Maya again. Her daughter's cheeks glowed with pride, her posture tall and confident. Lena thought of the little girl once tethered by a fragile heart, asking, "What if I'm not brave enough?" And now here she was, strong, thriving, bearing witness to everything courage had built. Later, as the ceremony ended and the crowd slowly dispersed, Lena stepped off the stage into a sea of familiar faces. Gloria was there, leaning on her cane but smiling so wide that it lit her entire face. Diner co-workers had traveled miles just to stand in the back, waving proudly as if she were still one of them. They had all been part of the journey, and their presence reminded her she had never climbed alone. Amid the handshakes and congratulations, she felt a quiet presence approach. Keanu stood at her side, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. "Do you remember the envelope?" Lena laughed softly, tears blurring her vision. "I'll never forget it." He nodded. "You opened it when you were tired, scared, and ready to give up. That choice changed everything, not just for you, but for thousands of others. That's leadership, Lena. You've given people more than money or programs. You've given them belief." For a moment, she couldn't speak. She simply reached out and squeezed his hand, gratitude flooding through her. She knew he didn't want the spotlight, but she also knew that without him, none of this would have been possible. As the sun began to dip behind the White House lawn, Lena stood surrounded by her daughter, her friends, and a quiet mentor who had once chosen to believe in a waitress. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was carrying borrowed courage. It felt like her own. That night, back in their hotel room, Lena placed the medal on the nightstand beside Maya's bed. The girl traced its edges with her fingertips and whispered, "We did it, Mom." Lena brushed her daughter's hair back and kissed her forehead. "Yes, we did. And this is just the beginning." Outside, Washington's lights glowed against the night sky. But inside that room, the only light that mattered was the hope they carried together. For Lena, the medal wasn't an end. It was a promise. A promise that courage, once found, could change generations. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that carried a sense of peace instead of loneliness. Lena sat in the living room of the home she never thought she would own. The walls held more than photos and decorations. They held the story of everything it took to get here. Above her desk hung a frame, simple but elegant, containing the very first envelope with her name written across it in neat handwriting. The paper had faded slightly over the years, but the power it carried never dimmed. She leaned back in her chair and studied it, her thoughts drifting to the morning it all began. That spill, that moment when exhaustion and chaos collided, and she thought she had ruined her life in the span of a few seconds. She remembered the sting of hot coffee on her hands, the shame rising in her chest as she looked up and realized who it was she had spilled on. Yet instead of anger, she had been met with grace. Keanu's calm response had not only changed her day, but had altered the entire course of her life. "Sometimes the worst mistake of your day is the doorway to your destiny," she whispered softly. It was a line she had repeated to herself countless times, a truth she had lived. That one accident had set everything in motion. The envelope, the gift, the surgery, the move, the foundation, the opportunities. All of it had been born from what she once thought was the lowest moment of her working life. In the kitchen, she heard Maya humming. Her daughter was older now, healthy, strong, and so full of life. The sound filled the house with warmth. Lena thought of the night she had once cried herself to sleep, fearing her little girl would never get the chance to live without fear of her heart failing. Those memories were still sharp, but they no longer cut her. They served as reminders of why she had chosen to keep going, why she had chosen courage over fear. The foundation had grown beyond her imagination. Every week, she still met people who reminded her of herself. Waitresses, janitors, warehouse workers, cashiers, people overlooked, people who carried brilliance behind tired eyes. She gave them the kind of chance she had been given, not because she wanted to repay a debt, but because she understood. She understood what it felt like to believe you had no way out, and she knew what it meant when someone finally saw your worth. She looked back at the framed envelope and smiled. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the opportunities. It was about the belief behind it, the message hidden in those few words. Don't give up. That was the gift Keanu had truly given her. Lena walked over to the frame, touched the glass, and remembered the weight of that envelope in her trembling hands. Back then, she had been terrified to open it, worried it was a trick, something too good to be true. But courage had won that night. And courage, she now knew, had a way of multiplying once you chose it the first time. Her mind drifted through the years, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. She saw Gloria, her steadfast neighbor, the one who reminded her that people who loved her wanted her to be free. She saw the faces of her co-workers at the diner, who had thrown her a farewell party with nothing more than cake and love, but it made her feel like she was already a success. She saw Dr. Patel standing in the hospital hallway, with tears in his eyes when he told her that Maya's heart was strong. And of course, she saw Keanu. Not the movie star the world adored, but the quiet man who had slipped away from the spotlight just to hand her a chance. He had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. He had stayed in the background, watching her step into the light. That humility was what had made his gift even greater. The framed envelope wasn't just a relic. It was a reminder that kindness wasn't random. It was powerful. It had started with a stranger giving her a chance, and now, every decision she made carried the possibility of doing the same for someone else. She had seen lives change in ways that mirrored her own. A warehouse worker turned inventor, a janitor turned app developer, a cashier turned environmental advocate. Each of them had gone on to help others. The ripple effect was undeniable. Lena walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The neighborhood outside glowed in the warm light of dusk. Families were gathering around dinner tables. Children played in the yards. Neighbors waved at each other across the street. She thought about how far she had come from the cracked sidewalks of her old apartment complex. Back then, she had dreamed only of survival. Now she dreamed of futures, for herself, for Maya, for the countless people whose lives intersected with hers. Maya appeared in the doorway, her face soft with curiosity. "Why are you staring at the envelope again, Mom?" she asked, her voice gentle but teasing. Lena laughed quietly. "Because it reminds me of where everything began, of how one mistake gave us everything we have now." Maya tilted her head, studying her mother. "Do you think things happen for a reason?" Lena thought about that for a long moment before answering. "I think people happen for a reason. Someone showed us kindness, and that kindness changed our lives. Now it's our turn to keep passing it on." Maya nodded slowly, her eyes shining. "Then we should never stop." "No, baby," Lena whispered, pulling her into a hug. "We'll never stop." They stood by the window together, the framed envelope glowing faintly behind them in the lamplight. It wasn't just paper. It was a symbol of everything they had lived through. It was proof that sometimes the very moment that feels like your undoing becomes the seed of your destiny.